Hi, my name is Uriel and I am part of the chemistry lab at McMaster University, the so-called Chem.ai group. Um, Today I'm going to introduce you the new package library inspired from font search called funminks. This is a set of utilities that allow you to integrate LLMs in the search for new functions. Before we begin, I'd like to talk a little bit about the story of these little creatures. A while ago, I made a game called Evolution in Action, where I attempted to teach students about the principles of evolution by natural selection. If you have a population of creatures, in this case, back then I called these creatures minks, that have DNA and variation in a population, you can also insert certain types of environmental stressors called selective pressure that over time modifies and changes the properties of this population. In this case, the color was the main heritable trait, and the user had to click on these little critters. So after a while, only those that were hard to perceive by the naked eye would remain. The ingredients of evolution take us to talk between genotypes and phenotypes. Genotype is the underlying hereditary components, modular structures that are passed from one parent to its offspring. The phenotype, in contrast, is the expression of that genotype that is actually measured under the optimality criterion or the function of selection. Here we have a population of minks, and the principle of evolution by natural selection takes as its first ingredient what is called as variation. Not all individuals look the same. We also need a decent population size that is allowing us to have a good representation of different genotypes and phenotypes. A measure of fitness that allows us to identify which ones are quote-unquote better than others under certain circumstances. And here you can imagine a predator that is able to see the color red but not the color green. Eventually the population will tend to move towards a green population simply because under that environmental stressor, that is the best strategy. Here we touch the principle of hereditary traits. The color only makes sense as an evolutionary strategy if it is passed from one parent to its offspring. As we move down through different generations, we end up with changes in the properties of color in our populations. So let's talk about genetic algorithms. Genetic algorithms try to catch the similar principles but using a programmatic approach. Let's start with a fitness function that is a pattern that underlies certain phenomena or mechanism in nature. Let's suppose for now that we have this expression, x squared plus b to the square minus 10. Notice b is set to a constant parameter of 3. If we use this function in a scale that goes from -4 to +4, adding at intervals in x of 0.1, we will end up with a table that looks like this. What is nothing else than a distribution of points. The fitness phenotype target. This will be the target of the functions that will be produced by the program. It turns out that in nature, we rarely actually see the underlying function or know the underlying function that causes this pattern. We only see a pattern. Luckily for us, that is exactly what the target of the funminks algorithm is supposed to figure out. We are trying to get this information back somehow and maybe optimize the way that we represent this function. Let's talk now about how we can insert this information to our minks population. We need an algorithm that represents a genotype. This expression, with all of its different components, is expressed in the form of a phenotype that is nothing else than a straight line. Of course, we need minks. And here is where we introduce them. The genotype is now a representation written in Python in the form of a string, but here I'm presenting it as a functional snippet in the Python language. And the phenotype is going to be compared against the target fitness phenotype that we saw from the distribution of points using a measure of distance, in this case MSE. We will start with a single population with 100 identical minks. They all share the same initial genotype, this straight line. At each population in time t, we will apply the following algorithm. For every mink, we will evaluate its fitness. We will plot a series of values and compare them with the distribution of points that we saw in the fitness function. This will give us a single float value. Then we will sort the population by this fitness from top to bottom. Then we will choose the top 10 and we use them to parent 100 babies. Then for each of those babies, we will introduce mutations. And here is where things get very interesting, because mutations are hard to implement in terms of code. That's where LLMs jump in, because they add coherence and a sense of direction to certain types of changes that we may ask the LLM to do at every single generation. While the program optimizes with the evaluation fitness and MSE, the mutation protocol is taken care of by the LLM. I'm starting here. This is just a folder, but I have created a virtual environment just for the sake of simplicity, because otherwise it will take a lot of time. I'm gonna go to the internet. I'm gonna do a git clone of the funminks repository. We are here in the official repository of funminks. And if I go to the top right corner, I can copy this link and I can paste it in the terminal located at the folder where I am currently attempting to do the cloning. So I type git clone, right click to paste, and then I press enter. The cloning shouldn't take long. It doesn't have a lot of files. So here, let's see what we got. So we got the genetic algorithm LLM. In this quick demo, you are looking at it before the release, so it doesn't have the name funminks yet. So here we have multiple files. Among them, main is the one that we will use to run the code. So let's take a look at it first. I can open VS Code, and now we can see the different pieces that make a repository. So in main, the most important component will be here. For us, at least at the scope in which we are having this conversation. Here we are going to specify the location of the model directory as has been downloaded from Hugging Face. And that information on how to download the model is contained in here. I placed two different versions, one for Linux, one for Windows, to cover the most frequent scenarios. And here I see the example of the name of the models that we can download. These are parameters that are embedded into the command line. This is in Windows something that is loaded into PowerShell, and in the case of Linux is embedded into the bash command line. So let me show you how this works. First of all, we will create a new environment. Creating the virtual environment, and actually I think I am gonna create a new one. I already had the other one, but it may be good just to confirm everything works smoothly every time. I will start by activating the version of the interpreter that I need to use. In my case, I'm gonna use Python 11, but because I have Conda installed, if I type Python, it will default me to a different version. Which in my case is, I'm actually not sure which version it is. Let me see. It's 3.7, so it's really low. I'm gonna need to activate a different one. I'm gonna set conda activate, and I call it Python once in Spanish is 11, which means 11. Once I activate it, I'll be able to work with a new version. I do this because the virtual environment doesn't actually control which version of Python you use. It uses whatever you already have as an interpreter. So I'm gonna proceed to install the virtual environment, python-m VMB by standard convention. VMB starts with a dot and underscore, because why not funminks. So this is the environment for our funminks. I press enter, and relative module names not supported. Python oh sorry, I forgot the actual command. So it is -m, then the name of the command that we want to execute, and then the name under which that command will work. This process, depending of course on how fast your computer is, usually takes between 1 minute to 5 minutes. Once you have it, you can activate it. Now we need to activate the environment. To do this, we in Windows set the name of the virtual environment, followed by scripts, followed by activate, and then bat. Notice that here on the left side, I now see the virtual environment. I'm going to deactivate the Python once environment so that I only work with one. The next thing is to install funminks. We do this by typing pip install funminks. This will install most of the packages except for two. The first one is PyTorch and the second one Accelerate. I didn't include them because they change the installation depending on what the user needs and has. If you have a GPU, then you will need to install a different version of PyTorch than someone who doesn't. This will take a little bit of time, but notice that among those packages there is Hugging Face Hub, which is the package we'll use to download the DeepSeek models. We also have transformers and tokenizers, which are used by the large language model and are going to be integrated along with Torch. Okay, now that the environment has installed funminks, we can move forward and install PyTorch. Before I do so, I can do pip list just to show you, and we can identify where the package was installed. So that was here, right here. We are currently in version 0.1.1, and as we keep moving forward with new versionings and the fixing of bugs, depending on what we find in the GitHub issues, please remember to update it from time to time if it is that you find it useful. Okay, let's go to Torch and then we can install Accelerate. From the Torch main page, I can find the download specifications. I have the Windows machine and I want to run on the stable version using pip. I'm going to proceed to install it using the Python interpreter and the CUDA version 12.6. Your CUDA version depends on what NVIDIA GPU you have. If you have an NVIDIA GPU, otherwise you can select CPU and you can run the program as well. It just will be a little slower or quite a bit slower depending on what model you are trying to run. We go back here and still, this is very important, remember, with the environment active, we can install PyTorch. This will take some time. In the meanwhile, I will pause the video and see you once the download has finished. Now that PyTorch has been installed, we can install Accelerate. Once Accelerate has been installed, we are all set. The next part involves modifying and tweaking the algorithm, as well as modifying the default folders in which Hugging Face Hub installs the models that we get. We will start by looking into the stuff that we have in our repository. I am running Windows, and that means I will run setup_model.bat, and before I do so, I want to show you what's inside. Here we have the name of the model, I'm gonna install the 1.5 billion parameter Quen 2.5, and I'm gonna put it in the same directory where my repository is. I need to modify these 3 dots though. I will take the location where this file is, gonna copy its path, and I'm gonna change those 3 dots in all of the different folders. That should ensure that a new folder and subfolder structure HF is installed in here. Now, these ones over here stand for the availability of online resources from Hugging Face, and if we set them at 0, the package will attempt to download the models directly from the internet. If we set them to 1, however, those variables are telling Hugging Face to look for local versions of those same files. This one right here will be the one that will be in charge of downloading the model in the model directory. I will simply go back to the terminal and then type setup model.bat. Oops, that made an issue. What's the cause of the error? Oh, the problem is that the file path is incorrect. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay, so yes, it's true that this is the correct path, but it was pointing at the file setup model.bat because I did copy path. So I need to instead paste and then remove the name of that file. I save it once more and then we can run it again. Let's see if it works this time. Yes, it does. And now presumably it is downloading the weights and biases of the Quen architecture, 1 billion parameters, and now it's running and now it's downloading the weights and biases of the Quen architecture, presumably, and is putting them inside of the folder HF. I technically don't have to specify a new catch directory or a model directory. You could just run it in your C drive, but the problem is I'm running out of space, and most of these models are pretty heavy. This Quen is, I think, 3.5, 3 point something. Yeah, there it is, 3 gigabytes of space. So the Quen is not that big, but if you try to download DeepSeek, there are models that are 80 gigabytes, 90 gigabytes in space. And of course, if you want to run those, you need some very serious GPU power, right? There's no way to run that on a CPU. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll see you in a second. Okay, now that it is installed, let's go to the main.py, specify the name of the model, and then we can run the genetic algorithm. In main.py, we have the LLM params, which is the call to the helper method that is the endpoint from which we can load the weights and biases of the model. And for this, I'm going to pick the relative path / and HF, and there should be a folder called models. There it is, and inside the name of our model, which is Quen 2.5. And technically that's it. However, let me guide you through what's going on here in the templates. Templates contains 3 elements. The first one is the data points that were calculated based on an underlying function, or are just points that were sampled from an experiment, etc. Right? They are given from a range of values, from the negative value to the positive value, where the center is 0. It doesn't have to be that way. It is up to the user to define these ones. And for that matter, it doesn't even matter if these are properly defined numbers, because this is going to be read as a string and it's going to be fed into the template. And by template, I mean this prompt template. This is where everything happens. The information is given to the LLM and the LLM processes the information. here we can see some tag names, placeholders. So the first one is data points. The program will identify this name, always this name, and then will insert the data points that I just showed you in the form of a string. And it will do the same with a function. Here we can modify the template, but just remember to pass data points and function every time, even if those files are empty. Here we have the seed. This is what we start with. It is the very first function that all of our minks will share at the beginning of the simulation. Let's run this program. Instead of running VS Code, I will run it in the terminal where I just finished downloading Qwen. I do this because that is where I have run setup model.bat. So let's run then python main.py. And if everything works well, I should load the LLM, weights and biases, and begin the training of our algorithm. I have an NVIDIA GeForce 1050 with 4 gigabytes in GPU, so it's really small. I have trouble running even the simplest models like Qwen, so I am not going to be able to show you a quick start to finish of the process, but the information will be stored at the end of every generation inside of a folder called outputs. Let's give it a minute, let's see how it does, and then I can show you how we can access the outputs folder. And here we go. We are running generation 1 out of 50. If we wait for long enough, we will end up running all of the 50 generations, and we'll see the versions of the Python scripts that were generated inside of the outputs folder. So let's take a look at our main repository. Notice that there is now a new folder that has been created, outputs, and that is where we will find the executables.